Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. The New Stack thanks the Code team for sponsoring our podcast from KubeCon CloudNativeCon in Austin, Texas. Learn more about the open source projects Code is supporting and its team of passionate open source engineers and advocates building community through contribution and engagement in emerging technologies. Learn more about Code at thecodeteam.com. Hey, it's Alex Williams with the New Stack here at KubeCon. This is our first interview of the show. I am here with Josh Bernstein and Ben Hindman. How are you guys?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great.
Awesome.
Yep.
I'm very awesome. Very excited to have a little conversation here. I want to talk a little bit about Kubernetes, but in the context of really how it compares to Mesos, right? And how we're thinking about the differences and what are the different use cases for the different technologies. We hear a lot about Kubernetes here, but we're also talking about cloud native technologies. And you know, Mesos has been around for a long time, and I'm thinking of particular things that you're starting to develop around, for example, the SMAC stack. I wonder if we could start with there and just talk about the SMAC stack and how it compares, and how that serves as a point of comparison.
Sure. Yeah. Mesos has been around a long time. The cloud native OGs.
Are you old
right?
now?
I guess I'm old.
Yeah. What's old is new again?
Yeah, it's surprising. I read this article the other day called JavaScript for Dinosaurs. And dinosaurs is anybody before 2012.
We're dinosaurs now? I can't wait.
If you're using
to tell
JavaScript before 2012, then you're a dinosaur.
So if you were 20 when you started using JavaScript,
you're a dinosaur. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So let's see. When we first created Mesos, a big focus of ours was being able to orchestrate lots of different kinds of things.
Right.
And I think that's where SMAC really came from. Being able to orchestrate analytics, being able to orchestrate microservices, being able to orchestrate storage, key value stores, message queues. So that's kind of SMAC. It's Spark analytics, Mesos, the thing that helps orchestrate all those things. The Akka, really just generic for microservices. The C, Cassandra, key value store, and then the K for Kafka, message queues. And I think that's still exceptionally relevant for this day and age. Honestly, the microservices is probably the easiest of all the things to orchestrate, and the other stuff is the most challenging. I think, Josh, you have firsthand experience with orchestrating some of the harder things, as well as being at a place like Dell EMC, where storage has always been a much bigger challenge to orchestrate and manage in these environments. I think that's what we see at Mesosphere. We continue to see, which is a bunch of organizations. They want to orchestrate all these things and do things in the cloud-native way. Mesosphere is part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation because it's more than just microservices. It's getting that cloud-native experience for all those kinds of applications you're running on top.
It's up and running everywhere, right? I mean, Mesos is. I mean, it's in production.
Yeah, it is in production in a bunch of places. I was looking back at some of the speakers at MesosCon this year, and actually Dan Cohn, who's the ED of the CNCF, he sent me a funny email the other day. He said, "I'm trying to book a table for KubeCon, and I keep getting this funny error." And it was the error from OpenTable, and at the bottom it said machine. It was like 21.mesos. Whatever. I thought that was pretty fun. I mean, not that OpenTable was having an error, but
it's funny that you see that type of thing now, like on your status pages.
Yeah. We were kind of started talking about this earlier. I think a goal for really good infrastructure is that you don't know it's there, and people can just use it.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been something we strive for. And yeah, there's lots of organizations that use Mesos and continue to use Mesos today, and we don't even know about them because hopefully it's just doing its job.
Right.
I'll recount and try to answer another part of your question about,
Sure.
I think where the differentiation lies. It's a little ironic to do it next to you since you created the thing, but I'll give you my perspective on it. And I think what Mesosphere, the unique differentiator is this two-tier scheduling, or this application-aware scheduling. I remember when we all decided we were going to do this Mesos thing at Apple, and I was like, wait, this sounds like HPC. This sounds like job scheduling and grid scheduling. And I was like the biggest naysayer of it. And we invited Ben down from Berkeley at the time, and we were all in a room, and I waited through the hour-and-a-half presentation, raised my hand and asked him this question. I was like, so how is this not job scheduling? Because I feel like I'm a dinosaur and we've done this already. And I think that unique differentiator where Mesos asks the framework or makes a resource offer to the framework really enables you to orchestrate a wide variety of applications at the same time. And I've called it two-tier scheduling. I know they've picked it up as application-aware scheduling. And for me, that's so important in my experience and really, really unique. We see these kinds of primitives, I think these frameworks or these controllers being developed across other ecosystems, but that's what allowed me to be successful and why I've been such a big proponent of it, because you can run Cassandra and Kafka next to each other on the same infrastructure without resource conflicts fairly easily because of that unique capability.
What are the conflicts then that would arise in Kubernetes out of that?
Well, we'll see how the ecosystem develops. They're developing this. They're developing the technology around controllers,
right?
And we'll see to what extent they're able to sort of deal with this resource contention thing. But I think of all the work that Ben has done, not to minimize your entire career, but that intuition around letting the resource manager make the resource offer up to the frameworks was really critical.
What's the evolution of that two-tier scheduler now then? In light of a much more complex ecosystem than we had 5 years ago, back in the prehistoric age.
Yeah. Are we calling ourselves dinosaurs?
We're
still?
calling
ourselves. Yeah. If you're 25 or younger, maybe.
I thought it was 20 or younger.
20 or younger.
Yeah. What?
Right? Yeah.
I love that you asked that question, because there's actually still a lot of work that we're doing around that. Before I jump into that, though, I just wanted to address, because you asked, what is Kubernetes also trying to think about from this perspective? And I do actually think, it's very clear that there's a bunch of people in that ecosystem that are saying, wow, we do need this concept of a second-level scheduler.
Right.
We probably should have never called it the word scheduler, because it scares everybody away, and they think they need to go get a PhD to ever build one of these things. We probably should have just called it orchestrator or application-aware manager or whatever it is. But
you got a PhD, so I feel like you're entitled to call it whatever you want.
Yeah, but then other people don't want to play around with it. So I think that that concept is actually really, really important, and it will be interesting to see how it's picked up. It's very first class for us in Mesos, and it's one of the reasons why we can do certain things on top of the platform. That all being said, now to get to your question, the concept that Josh was talking about, this resource offer that's part of this two-level model, it can be done in even better ways. So the way it works today, I'm getting super technical here.
Sure,
is
great.
that good? Are you okay?
No, it's awesome.
I think I'm getting schooled now. This is great.
Well, so the way it's done today is what we like to think of as the pessimistic allocation, and the other word I'll use is optimistic allocation, and it really comes out of database theory. It really comes out of locking or parallelism, where you think of, are you trying to do updates in a pessimistic or an optimistic way? And a pessimistic way is you acquire the lock, you get to do whatever you want, then you acquire the lock, you get to do whatever you want. And an optimistic way would be to say, hey, here's some data, and you guys race to decide how you're going to make an update to that data. And where we're actually going with our two-level model is a world in which we can have even more optimism for multiple of these things to basically be racing to make changes.
So tell me, why is it a race?
So it's a race because you see a state of the world and you see a state of the world, and then you're both racing to decide which change you might want to make to that state of the world. And it's really actually interesting, because what we get to start doing is we get to start controlling how much of the state of the world you both see, so we can manipulate which decisions you might be making and lead you down particular paths that could lead to higher cluster utilization, better failure distribution, but we'll still give you some choice, which will make the frameworks, these things that are running on top, have even more smarts, basically, because they can see even more things.
So you almost
Capitalism for containers.
Yeah.
I think that's
You
what you should call it.
almost-
Capitalism for containers.
But you
A
said
race.
you said the conditions then, and and you can manipulate the conditions
Yep.
based on availability.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can start to play some really interesting games, and I mean, yeah, it's future stuff. But I think, you know, I think the reason why I brought it up is for no other reason than it's, you know, it's not like it's a piece of technology we keep thinking about, right? And when we originally called it an offer, I think we were very much thinking about like markets.
Now I finally get it.
Yeah.
All these years been using all these applications, all these technologies made by these technologists, and they're just messing with me
Yeah.
the whole time. Oh, this application's slow. There's someone's back there.
Ben is back there like twiddling some knob. You know, be like, ha ha.
Well, you know, at the end of the day, I think this is, if you ask like what's the value of a cluster manager, I mean, really it should be kind of basic and not do a ton, but if there's anything it can do, it can try to play smarts like this. You know, there's not a ton of smarts it should really play. It should just do its job. If someone says run this container, which put it on the resources, pull in any file system or mounts it needs, do whatever it needs to do. The smarts I think it could start to do is especially around resource allocation, utilization.
That's
those
its
types of
job in
things.
the end. I mean,
That's its smart job, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a big push for us, is to play those tricks.
So that speaks to some interesting new times, doesn't it? You know, in terms of like the need to have that intelligence to be able to execute on tasks,
Yeah.
for example. So those tasks have to be scheduled because the resources are not unlimited, right?
Right.
You know, there is this limitation to the resources, and now you then have to really take into considerations like storage, don't you?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you know, in sort of the journey from, you know, virtualized technology into containers, you try to run applications that require persistence, like Kafka and Cassandra and even MySQL. You know, like just a single host MySQL instance. And the way that you would do this, I think historically was, well, you say, well, I know the MySQL data is like on that one host, so we're only going to run this container on that one host, and you have this resource affinity set up, and like that worked, but it always felt like cheating to me, because there was this huge migration of infrastructure,
Right.
when you're shifting the whole way the environment is managed and orchestrated, but then you're saying, but only run these processes on these nodes. Like, if that's acceptable, then why did we do all this work to begin with? I don't know, and that's really where Rexray came from. That's where libstorage came from, and now at the show we're really talking about the container storage interface, or CSI,
Right.
and I look at that as, you know, a culmination of many years worth of frustration and effort to say, look, we need a way to solve this problem. Really, it was selfish initially, but I think it really prevented adoption of the technology, and that's been my goal moving forward with it.
Interesting. So now we are here. We're here at KubeCon. The discussion is, you know, quite a bit around, you know, all these different cloud native technologies, but we're also seeing a race in itself as well, aren't we? There's 4,100 people here. There's obviously maturity happening in the ecosystem.
There's a lot of 1.0s in the keynotes today.
Yeah. Whether
The
it's
1.0 is still something. I don't know if is there a class on that in grad school? I never went, so I wouldn't know.
This is 1.0 day, isn't it?
This is
Yeah.
1.0 day.
Yeah.
I actually don't think that's a great thing for the ecosystem, but it's a thing.
So what do you
it's a
mean?
thing.
It's just so green?
Well, I think that perhaps I don't want to speak for any of the projects because I'm not
Right.
sure, but from I think what I've seen in the past couple of years, I think sometimes we get a little bit too eager about 1.0s because that pulls in, you know, in the hype curve, right? It's like crossing the chasm. The 1.0 pulls in not the early adopters, but
The ones who are the-
pragmatists.
yeah.
The latter adopters, or the
Yeah.
conservative adopters.
Not the conservative ones, the one just before that.
Yeah.
You know, where the crossing the chasm
Yeah.
is like the 1.0.
Yeah.
And it's being a member of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, I want cloud native, regardless of any of the technologies, I want cloud native to be successful.
Right.
Which means I want people to be successful with all the technologies.
Right.
Which means I think it's important that we're we do the best job we can to label the things appropriately. I think we should blow this out of proportion.
No,
I just think it was interesting that there was lots of 1.0s today.
It's funny. It's a pet peeve that's been on my mind too. Like we talk about all the time with our releases. You know,
Right.
what's the number for this release? It's 0.12. Well, when are we going to call it 1.0? Well, after another 88 releases, we'll be at 100, and then we'll move the decimal point over. Like, but I do think that, to Ben's point, like, you know, this 1.0 thing may or may not be premature, but I think it is indicative of the growth of the ecosystem and the excitement around it.
Yeah, I think it also points to an eagerness, you know, on the part of the people who are, you know, trying to get these technologies adopted, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious, though, in perspective, when you were developing Mesos in its early days, how did you treat releases? Did you?
Yeah.
You started. What did we go to production with? 0.97.
I'm sure.
Like, I don't.
Yeah.
It was this GitHub hash. Like,
Yeah.
I
mean, we just did a 1.0 for Mesos last year.
Yeah.
So we did a really long time. The number of people that were in production in a really serious way. For us, we wanted to take it super seriously. We wanted to say, with, you know, a big important part for the Mesos evolution and sort of that whole ecosystem is we had folks running this stuff in production and we couldn't break them. So even prior to 1.0, when we went from each next release, we couldn't break them. If we broke them, that would be a travesty. They would stop using the tech, and so for us, 1.0 was really about saying, okay, we want to break you. Right? Like,
that's a nuanced attitude.
You know,
1.0 is going to break everything.
Well, we want to tell you that you need to start doing some things differently, because when we get to 2.0, you're going to lose some stuff. It's going to break. So we want to force you in a real deprecation cycle to start thinking about this stuff. In 2.0, when we do a 2.0, which will probably be sometime next year, some of the stuff from 0.97, and definitely some of the stuff in you know, not in 1.0, but from pre-1.0 is going to be gone.
Yeah.
Right.
And people need to kind of recognize that, but we've given them like a nice long lead time. I think this kind of stuff is critical, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of companies out there that can deal with the, oh, something broke, I can shut everything down, bring it back up. Oh, this thing's not compatible, I'll shut it down, lose some downtime, bring it back up. You know, that mentality of like, there's still websites out there today where they'll say Sunday at 2 a.m. expect some downtime.
Yeah, we shut it down.
Yeah,
You're like,
downtime for our website, right?
What year is it?
Yeah, and you know,
Salesforce does that.
anyway, it's a good place for us to get to, which is a world where that's not happening.
So quick question then. You know, we're coming up. We have just a few more minutes left. What is the intersection then between, you know, an engine like Mesos and an engine like Kubernetes? Because we're starting to see that integration now.
Yep.
You know, in terms of how they support each other.
Yeah. Well, so for us, we actually had tried to bring Kubernetes onto the DCOS platform when Kubernetes first came out. It was the early days of Kubernetes, and for us to sort of say, hey, here's choice between Kubernetes or Marathon to our customers was not a great choice to give, because it was still too early days for Kubernetes. We always planned to circle back and bring it onto the platform when it was more mature, which is something that we actually did this year. In the Mesos ecosystem, there's been a ton of container orchestrators. There was Titus from Netflix. There was Singularity.
I forgot about Titus.
There was Singularity from Groupon, and I forget who else.
Singularity.
Yeah, they
Wow.
called it Singularity. Oh,
Yeah.
HubSpot. Singularity was
HubSpot.
Groupon. HubSpot. There was Aurora from Twitter.
Yeah, right.
Aurora's still kind of a thing.
Aurora's definitely still a thing. Yep. There were others that other organizations had that they have talked publicly about, but I won't talk about. Okay. And
Moving on.
And then there's So for us, it was just kind of natural to be able to bring in more container orchestrations. Now there's more overlap between Kubernetes and Mesos than there was between, say, Kubernetes and Marathon or Kubernetes and Aurora, because it's also doing some stuff that's standalone, whereas these other container orchestrators could only run on their own. But so we always want to bring it back in. We think it's an important part of the ecosystem. and we think we can provide some real value. I mean, again, we believe we can run things like Kubernetes. We can run multiple instances of Kubernetes. We can make the experience of deploying and managing and upgrading and all these things be great, leveraging all those primitives that we talked about earlier, alongside your Kafkas and your Cassandras. We can do orchestration for your Kubernetes clusters as well in a really, really powerful way.
Maybe you'll call the acronym SMAC 8.
SMAC 8,
SMAC
there
8,
you go.
I don't know, or 8.0 or some SMAC.
Optimistico.
You really
That's
like
a good
that
one.
optimistic stuff.
You should maybe you trademark that right away. Optimistico.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that from my perspective, I've always believed that a rising tide raises all boats, and I think this shift, with Kubernetes on top of Mesos or Kubernetes alongside Mesos, it's just the industry and the community as a whole is embracing cloud native technology in general, and I think that's the intersection that I see that I think is important, and innovation in both stacks and innovation in the community as a whole will only benefit the end users and will benefit the community in the end. So that's the way that I look at it. I think that the concept of treating Kubernetes just like another Cassandra instance, and this idea of multi-tenancy at some reasonable scale is, can be really powerful. Being able to run a Kubernetes next to a Kafka and Cassandra, and just treat it like another application, is a powerful construct. But again, it's all about, I think, as Ben said earlier, making cloud native, a staple of modern infrastructure.
Right. Lift all those boats.
That's right. Yep, that's
Josh,
right.
Ben, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about the distinctions between Kubernetes and Mesos and the overall cloud native ecosystem, and look forward to talking again soon.
Look forward to it, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
The News Stack thanks the Code team for sponsoring our podcast from KubeCon plus CloudNativeCon in Austin, Texas. Learn more about the open source projects Code is supporting and its team of passionate open source engineers and advocates building community through contribution and engagement in emerging technologies. Learn more about Code at thecodeteam.com. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.